The grand hall of the Galactic Council echoed with the murmurs of hundreds of species. Tiers of crystalline seats encircled the center stage where a single figure stood, a human. Their name was Captain Elise Carter, leader of the newly formed Earth Expeditionary Fleet, and she was about to make her case to the most influential assembly in the universe. But something in the air felt off, almost like a murmur of tension that could break at any moment. It wasn't the hundreds of alien species gathered, each with their distinct features and bizarre quirks. It wasn't the dozens of languages mingling and translating into a symphony of sound, nor was it the grandeur of the Galactic Hall itself, with its hovering platforms and endless columns of shimmering light. No, it was the way the council members were looking at her, smirking, eyes narrowed in amusement, as if the whole thing were a joke. She didn't know what exactly had irked them, but she knew they didn't think much of humanity. They hadn't from the beginning. Despite Earth's rapid technological progress, the aliens viewed humans as little more than an unpredictable curiosity. Elise Carter of Earth, please make your statement, said the voice of the council's leader, an octopus-like alien with 8 pulsating, bioluminescent arms. His name was Skoldar, and though he had yet to speak, his massive form exuded authority. He towered above the rest, and his long, coiled limbs reached out in gentle, rhythmic movements. His eyes were fixed on her, the color of his skin shifting between shades of green as he spoke. "Thank you, Skoldar," Elise replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She cleared her throat and adjusted the device she was holding, a small portable hologram generator that displayed an image of the Earth. She began her speech, her tone firm but measured. "Members of the Galactic Council, I stand before you today to make a request on behalf of my people. Earth is seeking membership in this esteemed assembly. We believe our unique perspective, our technological capabilities, and our drive for progress could be of great benefit to the wider galactic community." The moment she finished speaking, the hall burst into laughter. The sound was like a roaring wave crashing over her, reverberating in her ears and making her feel small, insignificant. At first, she wasn't sure what had caused the outburst. Was it something in her delivery? Perhaps the translation had gone wrong? No, she quickly realized, it was her species. A voice from somewhere in the back of the hall, a tall insectoid creature with iridescent wings, called out mockingly, "Humans? You barely even mastered space travel. Why should we let you in?" Another voice, this time from a floating jellyfish-like being, added, "You're not even old enough to properly understand the deeper complexities of galactic politics. Your species barely made it out of your atmosphere." The laughter continued, growing louder. Elise gritted her teeth, but she held her ground. This wasn't the first time humanity had been underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. She had expected this reaction. Still, it stung. It was hard to be so utterly dismissed by beings who had centuries, even millennia, of knowledge and experience at their disposal. Skoldar's voice broke through the cacophony, his calm and commanding tone silencing the crowd in an instant. "Enough. Let the human speak." The laughter died down, though the sneers and derisive glances persisted. Elise could feel the heat of their judgment. She pressed on, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about her or her species, it was about the future of Earth. The stakes couldn't be higher. She couldn't afford to back down. While it is true that humanity is young in comparison to the other races here, we have achieved remarkable progress in a short period of time. We've unlocked the secrets of quantum physics, conquered faster-than-light travel, and even established our first interstellar colony on Alpha Centauri. More importantly, our history, our mistakes, have made us resilient. We've learned from our failures. Another voice interrupted her, this one an ethereal being that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, its form indistinct but its presence formidable. "And what of the war that nearly destroyed your planet? How does that demonstrate your resilience? How does that demonstrate your fitness to join the galactic community?" Elise's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the eyes of every being in the hall on her now. The Galactic War, a disastrous conflict between Earth's nations that had nearly wiped out humanity. It was still a sore point, one that no one ever seemed to let go. It was a reminder of humanity's impulsive, often reckless nature, but Elise had never shied away from it. If anything, it was proof that humanity had learned to survive despite itself. Humanity's past mistakes are not something we hide from, she said, her voice unwavering. Yes, we fought each other, and yes, it almost destroyed us. But we survived. We rebuilt. And now, we seek to be a part of something greater, to learn from the civilizations that have long since mastered the things we are still figuring out. We want to be allies, not adversaries. We want to contribute. There was a long pause, and Elise could see the flicker of doubt in some of the council members' eyes. Not all of them were hostile. Some seemed intrigued, but it was hard to tell if they were truly listening or just trying to pass the time until they could vote her out. Skoldar raised his arms, signaling for quiet. We have heard your plea, human. However, there are other matters we must attend to today. Your request will be reviewed, but I cannot promise it will be granted. Elise nodded, the sting of rejection already starting to creep in. She had expected no less, but it still hurt. As she turned to leave, the weight of failure pressing on her shoulders, she noticed a few of the other council members whispering among themselves. She couldn't quite make out the words, but there was something about the way they spoke, furtive, as though they were trying to keep a secret. As Elise made her way out of the hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. She didn't know what it was, but she would soon find out. Later that night, as she sat in her quarters aboard the flagship Odyssey, a call came through from an unknown source. It was a transmission from an encrypted channel, one that was used by high-ranking members of the Galactic Council. Elise's pulse quickened as she opened the message. The face that appeared on the screen was familiar. It was Zorkin, an emissary from the Zardian race, a species of reptilian beings known for their cunning and sharp intelligence. Elise had met Zorkin only once, at a diplomatic event several months ago, and she hadn't expected to hear from him again. Captain Carter, Zorkin said, his voice low and measured. I must speak with you about a matter of grave importance. There are forces at play within the Council, forces that would seek to undermine the very stability of the galaxy. I have information that you must hear. Elise's heart skipped a beat. What kind of forces? She asked, her mind racing. Zorkin's eyes flickered with something, fear, perhaps. There are those who are convinced that Earth poses a threat. Not because of your technology, not because of your history, but because of something else. Something that has been hidden from the Council for centuries. Elise leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. What are you talking about? Zorkin hesitated. I cannot explain everything now. But trust me when I say this, Earth's future is tied to the survival of the galaxy. You must act, and you must act quickly. Before she could ask another question, the transmission cut off, leaving Elise alone in the dimly lit room, her mind spinning with questions and a growing sense of dread. Whatever this was, it was bigger than she had imagined. And she had a feeling the Council wasn't the only one underestimating humanity. The transmission from Zorkin had come with a warning, but now Elise was left to piece together the cryptic message he had left behind. The following days on the Odyssey were a blur of meetings, briefings, and long hours spent in her quarters trying to decipher any possible meaning behind the alien's words. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was on the horizon, a threat so vast that even the Galactic Council didn't understand its full extent. It was like a storm on the far-off edge of space, invisible to the naked eye, but coming closer with every passing moment. The first sign that something wasn't right came when the Odyssey received a mysterious distress signal from one of Earth's outer colonies in the Alpha Centauri system. The message was brief, a simple cry for help, but the coordinates suggested that it had come from a remote research station on a moon orbiting the gas giant Rylax. The message had been intercepted by the fleet's communication array just as they were preparing to depart from the Galactic Council's headquarters. Elise had immediately ordered a course change. She had no idea who or what was behind the distress call, but it was a risk she was willing to take. If this was connected to the warning Zorkin had given her, she had to find out what was going on. The council had been dismissive of Earth's membership request, but something told her that the true nature of humanity's potential was about to be tested in a way she hadn't anticipated. The Odyssey arrived in the Alpha Centauri system within a day, its sleek hull cutting through the stars. The research station, designated Rylax-12, was a small, self-contained outpost, home to a team of scientists and engineers studying the gas giant's atmosphere and magnetic fields. From what Elise had been briefed, it was a fairly routine operation, with no major issues reported in the past. The distress signal, however, suggested otherwise. Elise stood on the bridge, watching as the ship approached the moon. It was a barren world, with rocky craters and jagged cliffs that seemed to stretch endlessly under the dark sky. The station was located in a valley between two massive mountain ranges, its lights flickering dimly against the pale, alien landscape. The distress signal had been sent from within the facility's communications hub, but the signal had been disrupted just before it could provide any details about the nature of the emergency. The crew was already on high alert as they prepared to make their descent. Elise's first officer, Commander Ralek, a large, muscular being from the feline-like Calera species, stood next to her, his sharp eyes scanning the station's exterior on the view screen. His ears twitched slightly, betraying a hint of unease. "There's no sign of activity," Ralek said, his deep voice rumbling in the quiet of the bridge. "The station's power is low, but that's not unusual. It's a remote facility, after all. But there's something off about the signal. It doesn't match any standard distress protocol we've seen before." Elise nodded, her brow furrowing in thought. "I know. It feels wrong. We need to get to the source of this. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes." She turned to the rest of the crew. "Prepare for landing. We'll deploy a team immediately." Minutes later, the Odyssey's landing gear touched down on the moon's surface with a soft, grinding thud. Elise and a small team of officers, including Ralek and the station's chief engineer, Dr. Mia Chang, suited up and boarded a shuttle to Rylax-12. The ride through the moon's thin atmosphere was rough, the shuttle bouncing as it descended toward the station. Elise's heart pounded as she gripped the seat, her thoughts racing. What could possibly have gone wrong at such a remote facility? Was it sabotage? Or something far more insidious? The shuttle touched down in the station's docking bay, and Elise's team disembarked, their boots crunching on the cold metal floor. The air was thin, and the only sounds were the faint hum of the station's remaining systems and the occasional crackle of static from their communicators. The station's interior was eerily silent, the usual hum of life support systems and machinery absent. It was as though the entire place had been abandoned in a hurry. Dr. Chang, a sharp-eyed woman of Asian descent, adjusted her glasses and took a deep breath. "It's like a ghost town in here." Elise didn't respond immediately. She had a bad feeling, an unsettling sense that they were walking into something far worse than they could comprehend. The distress signal had been cut off abruptly, and the message was barely coherent. What could have caused such a disruption? As they moved deeper into the station, their flashlights illuminated the abandoned hallways. Doors were ajar, and papers were scattered across the floor. There was no sign of life. No crew members, no scientists. Just emptiness. "I don't like this," Ralek muttered, his feline ears swiveling as he scanned the area. "It doesn't feel right." Elise motioned for the team to continue. "We need to find the communications room. It's the only place that might give us more answers." They moved toward the central hub of the station, a large circular room filled with equipment. It was dark, the flickering lights casting long shadows along the walls. Elise stepped forward, her boots echoing in the silence. The communication terminal was in the far corner, and as she approached, she saw the telltale signs of tampering. "The terminal's been hacked," Dr. Chang said, examining the equipment. "Whoever sent that distress signal knew exactly what they were doing. They covered their tracks." Elise felt a knot form in her stomach. Someone had deliberately drawn them here. But why? What had they been trying to warn humanity about? Just as she was about to respond, a loud bang echoed from somewhere deeper within the station. Elise's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, she motioned for the team to follow her, sprinting down the corridor toward the sound. Every step felt heavier than the last, the darkness seeming to close in around them. They turned a corner, and what they saw stopped them dead in their tracks. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, its form hulking and indistinct in the shadows. It was humanoid in shape, but something was off. Its movements were jerky, unnatural. A low growl echoed from its throat as it turned toward them. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alien. It was something else, something grotesque, stitched together from different parts. The stench of decay filled the air as the creature lunged toward them, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow. Elise barely had time to react. She raised her weapon, but before she could fire, Ralek leaped forward, his powerful body slamming into the creature. The two tumbled to the ground, locked in a vicious struggle. The rest of the team opened fire, but their blasts seemed to have little effect. The creature was too fast, too strong. Elise knew they couldn't take it down with brute force alone. They needed to think fast. Her eyes darted around the hallway, searching for anything that could give them an advantage. That's when she saw it, a large gas cylinder near the station's old supply room. She pointed to it. "Dr. Chang. We need to get to that cylinder. We can use it as a trap." Without hesitation, Dr. Chang sprinted toward the supply room, her hands working quickly to disengage the valve on the gas cylinder. The creature was distracted, still struggling with Ralek, but it wouldn't be long before it turned its attention back to them. Elise gritted her teeth and ran toward the cylinder, joining Dr. Chang just as she opened the valve. The gas began to hiss out, and Elise set the trap in place, hoping they had enough time to lure the creature into position. As the creature broke free from Ralek's grasp and charged toward them, Elise signaled to the team. "Now!" Ralek, Mia, and the rest of the team opened fire on the creature, drawing its attention. It was exactly what they had been waiting for. The creature lunged toward them, its growl echoing in the narrow hallway, but it didn't make it far. As it crossed the threshold of the trap, the gas ignited, and the explosion sent the creature flying into the wall, its body disintegrating in a flash of light. The station fell silent again. Only the sound of their labored breathing filled the air. Elise stood in the wreckage, her mind racing. The creature was gone, but the question remained, who or what had sent it? And why had it been waiting for them? The threat was far from over. Something bigger was at play, and she could feel it. She had only just begun to uncover the depths of what lay beneath the surface of the galaxy. The quiet aftermath of the explosion was unsettling. The station's corridor, once filled with the eerie silence of a forsaken world, now lay in chaos. The remnants of the creature were strewn across the walls, smoke rising in tendrils from the destroyed gas cylinder, and the heavy scent of burnt metal and decay filled the air. Elise stood there, her heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. What was that thing? What had they just encountered? For a moment, everything seemed to slow down, her senses overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. Ralek was still catching his breath, his feline-like eyes scanning the hallway for any signs of movement. Dr. Chang, always the pragmatic one, had already begun to assess the damage to the station's systems, trying to restore some semblance of order in the chaos. "Elise," Ralek spoke, his voice low, "this isn't a simple attack. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. The creature was engineered, and it was meant to lure us here. It didn't just show up randomly. It was waiting for us." Elise nodded, her mind whirring. The distress signal had been a trap, and they had walked right into it. But the question was, why? Who had sent it? And what were they trying to achieve? "Keep an eye out," she said, her voice firm. "We don't know if this is the only creature, or if there's something else waiting for us." "Mia, any luck with the station's communications?" Dr. Chang wiped her brow, looking frustrated as she typed rapidly on the terminal's console. "I've managed to access part of the station's logs, but there's heavy interference. Whatever happened here, it wasn't just a random attack, it looks like someone deliberately scrambled the systems." We're not going to be able to get full access without a complete diagnostic, and that's going to take time. But there's something else. I found a set of encrypted messages. They were stored in a hidden part of the system. Elise's heart skipped a beat. Encrypted messages. The sort of thing one didn't hide unless there was something worth concealing. What do they say? I'm still decrypting them, Dr. Chang said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But judging by the header, they're reports, high-level reports. The kind of information only a few people would be privy to. Elise didn't need to ask further questions. She could already guess the importance of those reports. If someone had gone to the trouble of keeping secrets here, it meant the stakes were higher than she had imagined. The situation was becoming more complicated by the minute. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from deeper within the station, followed by the unmistakable sound of something scraping against metal. Elise spun toward the source of the noise, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. The tension was thick, the air electric with anticipation. Whatever had been lurking in the shadows wasn't done yet. Elise, look! Ralek shouted, his sharp eyes catching something in the distance. He pointed toward the hallway that led deeper into the station's core. Through the smoke, Elise could see something moving, another figure, this one more solid, more structured than the grotesque creature they had just destroyed. It wasn't human, but it had a form that suggested intelligence. Elise's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a random attack, and this wasn't the work of some lone, rogue entity. Whoever was behind this had been planning for some time. They weren't dealing with a single rogue force anymore, they were facing an organized, intelligent adversary. Elise, Dr. Chang said quietly, her voice tense, I decrypted a portion of the message. It's worse than we thought. The reports refer to something called the human anomaly. They're tracking it, and they've been keeping an eye on Earth for some time. They know, that humans are more than just another species. There's something unique about us. Elise's heart sank as the weight of those words hit her. An anomaly. She had always known that humans were different in the eyes of the galaxy, that they had a certain drive, or resilience, or raw potential that no one had quite understood. But the Council's dismissiveness, the way they treated humanity like a joke, it was all starting to make sense now. The reports Dr. Chang had uncovered seemed to point toward a fear, one that ran deeper than just the potential for human conflict. There was something about humanity that had made some of the most powerful species in the galaxy afraid. And whatever it was, they were trying to contain it. We need to find out more, Elise said, her voice low and determined. And we need to move fast. I don't think we're the only ones who've been tracking the anomaly. She turned to the team, her eyes sharp. Ralek, Dr. Chang, help me secure the station's core systems. We need to find out who else is involved. We have to get to the bottom of this, and we need answers. Now. Before anyone could respond, the sound of movement grew louder, and from the darkness emerged more of the creatures. They weren't quite the same as the first one, they were faster, more agile. It was clear that whoever had created them had perfected their design with each iteration. Elise! Ralek shouted as he charged forward, claws extended, taking down one of the creatures in a blur of motion. This is getting worse by the second. We can't hold them off for long. We don't need to hold them off, Elise said, her mind racing. We need to get to the core systems. If we can tap into the central hub, we can override their control and shut down their access. They won't be able to send any more of these creatures. Ralek was already in motion, leading the charge as the creatures advanced, but Elise was thinking ahead. She needed to make a bold move to buy them time, something drastic. She glanced at Dr. Chang, who had begun to work furiously at another console, and then at the other members of the team, each fighting with every ounce of strength they had. The creature numbers were increasing, and their attacks were becoming more coordinated. It was clear that they were running out of time. Elise, look! Dr. Chang said, her voice cutting through the chaos. I've got it, access to the central control system. Good, Elise said, as she dashed over to Dr. Chang's side, her eyes scanning the rapidly flashing screens. Can you lock them out? I can try, but we're not the only ones trying to control this station. Whoever's behind this has security overrides on everything. Another creature lunged toward them, and Elise fired a shot, taking it down in a flash of energy. But she could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. The odds were stacked against them, and they needed something, anything, that could shift the balance. I've got an idea, Dr. Chang said, her voice steady despite the chaos. It's risky, but it might just work. If we can trigger a full station reboot, it will cut off all external control, temporarily. We'll be able to isolate the threat. Elise didn't hesitate. Do it. Dr. Chang worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console as she initiated the reboot sequence. The screens flickered wildly as the systems began to shut down, one by one. The creatures paused, confused for a moment, giving them just enough time to regroup. But Elise knew they couldn't rely on the reboot forever. They had one shot at this. They had to finish it now. She turned to Ralek, who was already back at her side, ready for whatever came next. We're going to have to face them head-on, she said. And when we do, we need to make sure we don't leave anything behind. With that, they rushed forward, ready for the final confrontation. Whatever this was, whatever was lurking in the shadows, they were going to face it together. They had no choice. The station hummed and flickered in the eerie silence that followed the reboot. Lights blinked on and off, the heavy hum of machinery groaning as the systems struggled to stabilize. But in that brief moment of disorientation, Elise felt a strange sense of resolve settle in. They were about to face the unknown, whatever the creatures were, whatever force was pulling their strings. She knew they couldn't allow it to spread any further. This was the pivotal moment. Ralek stood beside her, his powerful form poised for the onslaught that was sure to follow. His fur was matted with blood from earlier skirmishes, but his eyes burned with an intensity that spoke of his unyielding will. Dr. Chang, too, was resolute, even though her hands trembled slightly as she watched the reboot progress on her console. We can't keep relying on the reboot, Dr. Chang said urgently, her voice rising above the tension. The creature's control is weakening, but not fast enough. If they get control again, it's over. We need to take them down now. Elise nodded, her jaw set in determination. Do whatever you can to hold them off. I'll take the lead. The station was eerily quiet for a few moments. The creatures that had attacked earlier were momentarily halted by the reboot, but that respite was brief. The silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of movement, the low growl of something that was no longer an unpredictable monster but a well-trained predator, instinctively hunting its prey. And then they appeared, dozens of them. The creatures spilled from the station's darkened corridors, their glowing yellow eyes locking onto the team as they advanced. They were fast, their movements fluid and unnervingly precise, as if they were no longer just mindless beasts but had been conditioned to hunt with strategy. Elise's heart raced as the realization struck, these things weren't just engineered. They were trained, bred for war. Ralek, always the first to act, leapt into the fray with his usual ferocity, his claws flashing as he swiped through the air, his strength pushing the first wave of creatures back. Elise didn't wait. She dove into the battle as well, her training kicking in. With every shot fired, with every calculated move, she reminded herself why she was here, not just to survive, but to protect. Hold the line, she shouted to the team as the first wave fell back. But there was no time to celebrate. The creatures were relentless, regrouping and charging again. This time, however, Elise had a plan. If she could just find a way to cut off their access to the control systems, the fight might tip in their favor. Dr. Chang. Elise called out, as she dodged the swipe of one creature's claw. Is there a way to get into their central control hub directly? Dr. Chang barely spared a glance, her fingers flying over the terminal. I've got a backdoor in. I can access their command module, but I need time. Just give me a few more minutes. Elise's mind raced. If they could shut down their opponent's command center, they would be able to stop the creatures from coordinating their attacks. It was a gamble, but it was their only hope. Ralek, Elise shouted, we need a distraction. Keep them off Dr. Chan long enough for her to work. With a grunt, Ralek charged forward, his powerful limbs propelling him into the next wave of creatures. His claws raked through the air, sending two creatures sprawling as they collided with the walls. But as more emerged from the darkness, the battle quickly escalated beyond a simple skirmish. It became an all-out war. Elise found herself pressed from all sides as she fended off one creature after another, her weapon disintegrating the grotesque bodies in a flash of light. But the creatures were relentless. They were learning. Adapting. And Elise could feel the pressure building, the weight of the situation threatening to crush her. There were too many of them. Her team was growing tired. They couldn't keep this up for long. Just when Elise thought it couldn't get worse, the door to the central control room burst open, and more figures poured in, armed and armored, clearly not part of the creature force. They were humanoid, but their movements were sharp and controlled, a sign of professional training. Elise's eyes widened. "Who the hell are they?" she hissed under her breath. Dr. Chang's voice came through the comms, frantic. "It's a mercenary force, Elise. They've been working in tandem with the creatures. They're trying to seize control." The realization hit Elise like a thunderclap. The creatures were just the first wave. The mercenaries were the real threat. The battle was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a race to the finish. If they didn't stop the mercenaries from taking control of the station, the galaxy would soon see a new breed of war, one that used humans as mere pawns in a game of cosmic chess. "Get to the control center now," Elise yelled. Her voice, despite the chaos, was sharp, commanding. "Ralek, cover me. Dr. Chang, get the systems back online." Ralek, bloodied but unbowed, growled as he barreled through another wave of creatures, his claws striking with the precision of a warrior who had been forged in battle. He cleared the path for Elise as she sprinted toward the central hub, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The mercenaries were closing in on her position, but she couldn't afford to stop now. The control room was her only hope. She burst through the doors just as one of the mercenaries took aim at her. Without thinking, she fired first. The blast hit him square in the chest, sending him sprawling. But there was no time to savor the victory. More were coming, and they were organized. "Elise!" Dr. Chang's voice crackled through the comms, barely audible over the chaos. "I've got the control systems back. But I can't isolate them yet. They're pulling all their resources into one attack. You need to take out their leader." Elise turned to face the lead mercenary, a tall, broad-shouldered figure whose helmet gleamed with an almost unnatural shine. He moved with deadly precision, his weapon trained on Elise. She ducked just as a blast grazed her shoulder, sending a shock of pain through her body. The force of it knocked her off balance, but she recovered quickly, rolling to the side and firing back. The mercenary leader smirked beneath his helmet, seemingly enjoying the challenge. But Elise knew this had to end, and it had to end now. With a final push of determination, she sprinted toward the leader, her weapon aimed squarely at his chest. Just as he raised his weapon to fire, she fired first, blasting him square in the chest. The leader dropped, his body crumpling to the ground in a lifeless heap. For a moment, the station fell silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. The remaining mercenaries hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Elise didn't give them a chance. She moved quickly, securing the command center, locking down all external access points. And then, with a few quick commands, she initiated the full station reboot, one that would lock out all outside control, neutralizing both the mercenaries and the creatures that had been sent to destroy them. Dr. Chang's voice came through the comms again, relieved. "Systems are back under our control. We've got it. We're safe." Elise leaned against the wall, her body aching, but the weight of victory settled over her like a cloak. It had been a brutal fight, but they had won. The galaxy would remain unaware of what had almost unfolded on this station, and humanity would be safe, for now. As she walked away from the control center, her team falling in behind her, Elise couldn't help but think about the cryptic warning Zorkin had given her. There were those who feared humanity. But now, they knew that fear was real. And it would take more than a single station to contain what had been unleashed. She glanced at Ralek and Dr. Chang, both of them exhausted but alive, their expressions set with the same grim determination. "We've won this round," Elise said, her voice steady. But this is just the beginning. The galaxy, it seemed, had underestimated humanity. And now, they would learn the price of that mistake.